Welcome to the Mentl Awards 2023. This is a special edition of the Mental Space podcast, where we're focusing on our exciting new awards, which we're launching for October this year. The idea of the awards is to amplify and showcase best practice and highlight the work of those championing mental health inside their organisations. We've put together an inspiring selection of judges who will be completely independent, choosing the winners in each of the categories. And today, I'm delighted to dive into the story of one of our judges and sponsor of the awards, Nicklin. Welcome to the Mentl Awards 2023.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning, good morning.
Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for being involved in the Mentl Awards 2023. I think I've done enough brand awareness now on the title of the awards. Often I will give a potted history of our guests on the podcast, but you are involved in so many different things, Mimi, that I actually want you to introduce yourself to our audience.
Thank you. Well, my name is Nicklin, and as Scott says, I'm doing a lot of work across the world at the moment in empathy, predominantly. If we simplify it down, my real passion is to look at how we create more empathy in the world, in the workplace, in our leadership teams, and that takes me into various different areas. But I do have a book, so apparently I'm an author. That happened overnight.
Give us the title of the book.
The book is called Softening the Edge.
Okay.
And it is a bestseller now, and it's doing really well as this conversation around empathy rises, and we can touch on that, but it is a conversation that's changed massively in 3 years.
Absolutely.
I also have a podcast, which is called the Mimi You Show, which is a fully anonymous storytelling podcast, which has been created to create empathy in our world. So rather than talk about what empathy is or why we need it, it's actually creating stories from around the world, people from many different countries who can come onto the podcast. There's no camera, it's fully anonymous, and share their story with the world, because it's only through listening to others that we can create more empathy. And then I also have a branding and storytelling agency here in Dubai called Freedom, and we are creating, branding and storytelling for many brands, including Mentl, all around the world, from Dubai, which is a city that has my heart.
And thank you, because Freedom is going to be one of our sponsors for the awards in October. So that's amazing, and thank you for the support on that. Storytelling. You sit down and tell other people's stories. Give our audience a bit of your story. We've known each other for a long time, and you are always this bright individual with so much energy that's got so much positivity for everyone around you. Where did that come from? Is that innate? And what's your journey to here been? Why is this almost innate need to help people? Where's it come from?
It's such a big question. I don't really know the answer, but it's definitely inherent. It's definitely in me. I think it's always been there. I started my career in advertising. My father was an ad man. So for anyone that's ever watched Mad Men.
I was literally just thinking that.
I mean, literally that was his life. He's now 85 and also an amazing storyteller. And I always knew that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I never knew why. I love creativity. I'm a writer, I run a creative agency, but that was not it. For example, we don't enter any creative awards in my agency. I love it, but I don't care for it.
Okay.
I appreciate it. I love making it for my clients, but it's not what gets me out of bed in the morning. But it took me until my 30s, I think, to realize that really what did get me out of bed in the morning, made me smile, made me joyful, is helping people. And I think that can only be innate, because it's not like nobody gave that to me or taught it to me. It took me a long time, Scott, but once I had realized that when I help, I feel happy, everything else became easy. So I didn't leave my career and become an author and a podcaster overnight. But the minute I had recognized actually what I want to do is make sure I'm in service of people, which I know sounds like a massive stereotype, but for me, truly it's true. It doesn't matter what it is, how small it is. It just gives me joy, even when it's a really small random thing. So I was at the airport yesterday, and there was a lady, an Arabic lady, I'm not sure from which part of the Gulf, but she didn't speak any English. And she was trying to get into the airport with her child, who was scared to cross the road. And I've been there, right? She had the buggy, the suitcase, the kid. And so I said to her, can I take this for you? And she was so shocked. You know, she didn't know what, she couldn't speak English anyway, but she didn't know what to say, but she sort of, you know, nodded at me and said, okay. So I took this pram and this case and she picked up her child and we crossed the road and she looked at me. She was a covered lady and she just looked at me for like 3 or 4 seconds and said, thank you. And the rest of my morning was happy. I'm not joking.
No,
I just felt like,
yeah.
well, at least I did something today that mattered, right? Because of course the business world matters and of course we all have to earn money. Mm-hmm. But I just think that when you can create impact for humans, for people, I know what she felt like. I've been there. You know, I've been a single mum for a very long time. That moment of helping in that moment changes destiny. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? It changes everything. So I don't know, maybe that's a long way of saying what makes me happy, but what makes me happy is that. What makes me happy is meeting people, whatever moments there are in the day, and feeling you made a difference. And then the bad things, the complex things, the heavy things, they go away. They go away when there's more joy.
I was going to ask you that question because you talk about empathy a lot. I mean, you live empathy. You talk about empathy and the value of empathy and how we need it in our lives. To empathize, one needs to have been in a position where you can empathize with that person's difficulties to be able to help them. When did you need empathy? When were you in a situation when you needed somebody else to empathy? When did you learn the power of that? Because we have to have been in a dark place at times to actually then be able to understand other people's dark places.
See, I disagree with that.
Do
with
you?
The last bit, yes.
Interesting.
Yes, because empathy is actually based on the power of the imagination. Okay. So, and the reason I disagree with it is through my podcast, but through many of the things I've done in the last few years, I work with and I guess empathize with, but I mean spend time with people that I have no idea what their realities are. And I mean, I think in Dubai we do that all the time. You know, I just mentioned to you, I met a couple of gentlemen over my coffee this morning who were working in the coffee shop from South India. I can have had no idea of their life reality, or where they came from or how they've got to Dubai, you know. But that didn't mean that we couldn't stop and have a really good conversation and have a level of empathy with them this morning. The reality is when you put empathy into that, when you look people in the eye, you really talk to them. And we don't really talk to many people in our day, honestly. And now I've said that, think about it. How many people today you really talk to versus just share words with? And had that conversation gone further, they could have told me all about their life and what had happened to their family or their mother or their children. I would never have been in that same, what you were saying, dark place. But I can empathize. I can use my imagination, my power of connection to feel how they feel, to understand how they feel.
Our imagination needs to come from some reference point, though, surely.
Well, I think all pain is pain, right? So, I mean, it's impossible for any human being to have got definitely to this age, very young ages, but without
a third of the way through at the very least.
Let's not talk about that on the morning. But it's, you know, none of us have got here without any pain. So, yes, you're right, there is a reference point. We know what it feels like to be sad. We know what it feels like to be lonely or left out or bullied or whatever those emotions are. So in that way, yes. I think that on the spectrum of emotions, most of us know how to feel most of them because we have experienced them at some point in our lives. So in that way, yes, I guess you're pulling reference onto those emotions that you know exist. But I don't think you have to have been in that exact situation. In fact, it's not I don't think, I know you don't. Because people often tell me, but you understand me. And I think, well, yeah, I do. But again, I've never been where they've been.
We use the word a lot.
Empathy.
Empathy. I think it's probably just worth putting on the table your definition of empathy.
Yeah. Empathy is fundamentally perspective taking. And, you know, the empathy conversation is rising now. Someone wrote to me yesterday on LinkedIn and said, you're the OG of empathy. I had to actually message my sister in England. What does OG mean? She told me that it means like the original guy, right? Like the original. Sorry, everyone, didn't know that, but I know now. She said, you are the OG of empathy. And I notice now, Mimi, how many people are talking about it. Yeah. So the conversation's definitely rising, which is amazing. But I think that it's becoming very complicated. There are many types of empathy. There's cognitive empathy and emotional empathy and all different types of empathy. But I don't think it matters fundamentally, we need more empathy in our world. It doesn't matter what type.
Okay.
So really, empathy is about perspective taking, putting yourself in the shoes of someone else, understanding how they think, feel, see at that moment.
You mentioned different types of empathy.
Yes.
Just because this is a podcast where we do tend to drill in just a little bit further, why not just unpack for us just a little bit the different types of empathy? But we'll circle back to, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you. But just for the audience and as we're on this learning journey, what are those different types of empathy?
So there's emotional empathy, which is really the feeling. I feel like you.
Yeah.
I feel how you feel.
Okay.
There's cognitive empathy, which is that you understand how they think, or they're seeing the evidence or data set in front of them. And then there's something called compassionate empathy, which I don't really agree exists, because I think it's just compassion. But compassionate empathy is when you take empathy into action and act based on your empathy. But as I said, for me, I think that's just compassion. I mean, I'm not a doctor of science, so I wouldn't be able to give you the full breakdown of my opinion there. But every time I hear another professional talk about compassionate empathy, I think, surely that's just compassion. But either way, it's the action on that. Because the big misunderstanding of empathy, particularly in business leaders, a little less so in the Middle East, but definitely in South Asia, which is where most of my work is actually, is that empathy is about emotion. Empathy is about, is it what they call a soft skill. But empathy is not soft at all. You know, empathy is hard to find,
Yes.
hard to master, and hard to maintain. Right? These are not easy soft skills. So the empathy is your data set. Empathy is about me understanding you, how you feel, what you want, how you see, why you were late, why you're angry, why you're resigning, why you're exhausted.
Yeah.
Right? That's a data set. This is not an emotion. It's a skill set.
So we're bringing these awards to the UEE for the first time because we want to really highlight the good work that's being done in this space. Organizations, individuals, whether it be in the private sector or in the public sector, who are tackling the stigma of mental health, who are expressing and encouraging empathy within their organizations. When you look at the world and when you look at this region, what are you seeing in terms of the need for us to have these positive conversations around this? I saw a piece of research yesterday. Gallup's just done this massive piece of research about the state of the workplace. One of the statistics that really stood out to me was that literally a third of us are angry every day. A third of us, like when they asked everybody, like, are overriding emotions, stress. 1 in 3 in this region compared to almost like 1 in 5, I think it was, that they found on the global perspective. But in this region, 1 in 3 of us are stressed. And 1 in 3 of us yesterday was angry when they were asked in this. So there's a lot of emotion. And we've seen the burnout figures as well. You know, the Cigna 360 wellbeing research, 98% of us suffering at least one symptom of burnout. You based around the world, you are a global entrepreneur. When you come back to this region, what are you seeing?
Well, I would say that I'm seeing, as someone who doesn't live here full time, I would see the reasons for that data. You know, so I come into town, I tend to come for three or 5 days. Yeah. And it's just very, very fast. Everywhere's fast. You know, don't get me wrong, when I'm in Mumbai, it's not like we work slow, you know. But there is something particularly about Dubai that feels very fast. So what I would say I'm seeing is the evidence of that data. You know, it seems to me like that makes sense. When someone tells me this data, and then I live my lived experience of, say, the last 3 days here on Business This Week, I think, well, that makes sense. You know, it just feels very fast. And we're not meant to be that fast all the time. When I ask people, because I'm interested, I ask everyone. I mean, back to the fabulous waiters that helped me this morning. I asked them about it. And they said, yes, you know, we never stop. They said to me, it's work, work, work in this city. I said, yeah, it is, you know. All the way to other CEOs or other people I'm working with, they all say the same thing, you know, it never, ever stops. So, yeah, that's what I would say I'm seeing. I think the conversation here is incredibly prominent, which is fantastic. You know, obviously, I follow you, Scott, so I'm in your algorithm on Instagram or LinkedIn, you know.
Goodness me.
I'm in your algorithm. But I see a lot of content. You know, a lot of the reports you said are coming out of here. A lot of the insurance companies here, like Cigna, are doing work around this. We're about to have mental health awards coming out of Dubai. So, and of course, you have a 4.5-day work week here.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right? Not many parts of the world have that.
Yeah.
So I think the conversation's also very prominent here, which is fantastic. But perhaps there's a reason for that. I'm not going to make that assumption.
Well, I mean, I guess it's almost like a mixed, a blessing and a curse to a degree, because we've got so much economic opportunity. And I think a lot of people here are deeply grateful for the fact we're here, deeply grateful that there's so much opportunity. But at the same time, that means we're on an accelerated path like we've never been on before. How does empathy help in that perspective? What do you think are the potential solutions when you talk to business leaders? Like, what are you telling them?
Well, not directly connected to empathy, although it's probably connected to self-empathy, which is the understanding of yourself. But what I'm telling everyone is slow down.
Yeah.
And more, I put that even on my personal social, and I'm probably talking to myself. I'm probably like...
Because I don't believe you're particularly slowing down, Mimi.
I'm not. But I'll tell you why I think it's really important, because beyond the rational exemplification of speed, which is us running around and going from this to the next, all of those things.
Yeah.
The world is just too fast, and social media is enabling that, right? So social media makes it look like we go from zero to hero overnight. And of course, the way that social media and perception is, when you start to do really well, so when they start to see Mentl everywhere and you're doing podcasts and you've got proper microphones and all these things, they just think, well, Scott changed his career and that magically appeared on the table. You and I were speaking this morning about the setup for this show, which of course your viewers can't see, but it's of epic proportions, right? You've got up this morning, you've got multiple cameras, you've got microphones and sound systems, you found us a space, you've organized a space, you and I have had many messages to get us here. All of that process is exhausting in itself. And that is probably 3% of your last weekend today. So why I'm saying that is, for all of the people listening and viewing, Scott didn't just wake up and miraculously appear on his own podcast this morning, right? And until we start to have that conversation, people are going to get faster.
Yeah.
Because they think, if I just do a few more things, then tomorrow I can be like Scott, right? It's not reality.
No.
But that's what social media makes it look like.
There's a really interesting book called 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman, which I talk about a lot. And I love it for, look, it's the premise of the title, which I often talk about, is the fact that, if you live to 80 years old, you get 4,000 weeks, which is terrifying in some respect.
God,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like, because 80 years seems endless, but 4,000 weeks, I can see it on the calendar. And I'm 2,700 into that. Thankfully, I'm going to live to 160 or so.
Awesome.
I promised my daughter that. So I've got more time. But he dives into this kind of concept that we're chasing inbox zero. We're trying to do all of these jobs around. And all we're doing is actually creating space for more work to fill in. And we're not... fill that gap that we've just created, and we're not putting in boundaries, and we're not prioritizing what we really need to do. And within those priorities, there's your family, there's your friends, but most importantly, which I think is the thing I think all of us often forget, is there is you. How do you look after you?
People ask me so often. I think it goes back to my point earlier. And I know it sounds stereotypical, but I truly mean it. That for every time I feel like I've made a difference, the energy comes back.
Yeah.
That is that simple for me. It really is an energy exchange. I don't get more energy from doing yoga or meditation or any of these things that everybody else tells me I should do. Breathing I do believe in, okay? I teach my daughter that all the time, like take a deep breath. But I do those things and they just make me more stressed. Because I'm trying to take time out to do this thing that everybody tells me it's supposed to help my mental health. But actually what helps me is making a difference. And I'm so overwhelmed by how sad the world is, Scott. Right? So my way of feeling happier or being weller, it's not a word, is it?
No, I think you just created it.
I invented it, done.
Oxford Dictionary, if you're listening, we have one for you, Weller.
IP coined
not
right
Paul
here.
Weller, but Weller. Yes.
It makes me feel more well when I feel like I am perhaps, in some tiny amount, just making the world less sad.
So But does that connect to the thing that makes, that helps you? And I've spoken to lots of different people out there, and we've talked about this before. Dr. Louise Lambert of the Happiness Project, she talks about, we talk about gratitude. Gratitude is a tool for some people, but she hates gratitude. It really annoys her. It's the thing that helps you, the fact that, you are connected to your meaning and your purpose. So actually doing that work, which is purposeful, that's almost like your happy place. That's what works for you.
I think so, but I probably wouldn't use those words because I think purpose, and I spend a lot of time working in branding and marketing. They are like buzzword 101.
Okay.
Right? I don't.
That clearly works because I'm using them. So it's your fault.
It's
your fault.
No, I didn't mean that. What I just meant was for me to talk about purpose feels like I'm not Nike. Like I feel like Nike can talk about purpose or some other big brand that has a big purpose.
Why can't you talk about purpose?
Because I don't feel that is what it is. I just feel that I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, which probably is paraphrasing. We're doing great with language this morning. We're inventing words, we're paraphrasing. But I'm not sure that it's my purpose to do this. I just think that I'm put here to help people when I can, and that's what I'm trying to do. Maybe that is a purpose, but it feels like a very big brand word to me, and I just think that I'm doing my little thing every day and trying to make a difference when I can.
We've had lots of conversations lately, and Mentl, we seem to be talking about this a lot. We've seen US Surgeon General turn around and say loneliness is as damaging to our health as tobacco.
Yes. 14 cigarettes a day, Scott.
15, actually.
15?
15, apparently.
Crazy.
Particularly in this region, we have a lot of expats that come to this region. They are separated and disconnected from their families.
Yeah.
Often, it's going to take them a while to put down roots, if indeed they ever do, in this part of the world. What are you seeing in terms of loneliness, and what can we do to tackle that? Because it's as important as eating properly and physical exercise and looking after our mental health is actually putting in something that responds to that loneliness.
Well, what's really interesting about loneliness is that loneliness is not the lack of people in your life, but the lack of connection in your life. So when I wrote my book, I wrote a chapter called Lonely But Not Alone, which I didn't realize the power of that sentence then. And now, in light of this conversation from the US and everything that's going on, it becomes really poignant, right? Because it actually defines what I just said, which is that we are surrounded by people all the time, but we don't have the connection that we need as human beings. We are pro-social animals. We are not meant to be alone. That's why the pandemic was so hard emotionally beyond the physical realities of that.
Yeah.
So it is a global endemic. We went through a pandemic, but this is an endemic. And as you said, it's far more dangerous to our health, actually, on a long-standing basis than anything else is.
It's now been linked to diabetes, obesity, even cancer. It kills us.
23% higher death rate. So if you suffer from loneliness, your risk of mortality goes up by 23%. You will literally die more quickly. Your 4,000 weeks.
Yeah.
Are coming
and we interviewed Roseanne Kenny, amazing professor who is part of the Irish aging study. It's called TILDA, the Irish longitudinal, I can't remember it, aging study.
Development Agency?
Something like that. She wrote a book called Age Proof, and she's researched cultures all around the world. And again, what she's found is that people who are lonely and also or don't have a purpose in life, they age. Like, why is one 80-year-old looks like they're 50 and they're doing triathlons and marathons, and another 50-year-old looks like they're 80? And loneliness and that lack of social connection, she says, is one of the major factors to that. Knowing what you know about loneliness, then, what are the things that we can do?
Well, first of all, to this lady's wisdom, we need society around us, When you look at the data, the pro-social, the very connected communities, the ones where you find, I saw the other day a lady in China, I think she was 124 or something, People often ask me when I come out of workshops or stages or whatever, but isn't what you're just talking about, thriving at work? And I say, no, actually, sir, what I'm talking about is the human race surviving.
Yeah.
And it takes me a few minutes to explain, but it makes sense. We are not meant to be alone. So what I'm seeing is that is impacting people all over the world, and when I talk about this, even in the most unlikely of places, so last night I spoke about it to a large room of real estate agents who were in the room to understand commission rates on a new building. So it couldn't have been further from a discussion around mental health.
Yeah.
But I mentioned it in my speech, and I had various of those agents from around the world come up to me afterwards and say, Mimi, thank you for saying that tonight, or I recognize what you said tonight. So even in the most unlikely of places, if you ask people, how do you resonate with this, or how do you feel, they respond. 51% of us are lonely.
I'm trying to just kind of like calculate that and work through that, because that's again terrifying. And we talk about 1 in 3 people being impacted by mental health, but the fact that do you know what? And is it 50%, or is it actually probably higher than 50%?
I don't know, but when you think of that on a global level, that's like a few billion people that are lonely. Like, how did the world? This is earlier this morning I said I sometimes get overwhelmed by how sad the world is.
Yeah.
This is why. There's like a few billion people lonely in the world, Scott.
What worries me looking forward as well, there's lots of different things that worry me, but one of the reasons why I created Mentl, people know my father's story, there is my story, but it's my children's story.
I know.
And I worry about social media, that connection. What role does social media play? Because we use it a lot to connect and share our message, but that's sometimes not a replacement for deep, genuine connection.
I have quite a few opinions on social media. I'm extremely positive about the role of social media. That doesn't mean that I'm naive to the challenges or the dangers, particularly for our children. You and I both have girls of a similar age. But I think that there's 2 things to bear in mind. Number one, it's just a platform and humans created it. So like any other platform, it's us, not it. It's not, the social media platform is not the bad guy here. We are the bad guys, right? We are on that platform. It is just propagating it. And there's always been newspapers, right? So I know it's always on and all those things, okay? But that's my first point, is that it's only...
I think we could get massively sidetracked on this.
We could, let's. I'm not naive to the challenges and the dangers of having the World Wide Web at our fingertips, right? But I do think it's just a platform, and it can be used for so much good that I think we have to be careful about sort of, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. But the second thing I would say is that genuine connection doesn't only have to be in the real world. I do deeply believe in that power. You can feel each other more over a table. There is something very important about the human sense of touch, whether that's shaking hands or touching someone's arm or those types of things. But what I've learned in the last few years, and I've had some really tricky times, particularly because I moved to Sri Lanka in the middle of a crisis, right?
Yeah.
So we won't go into that story today, but there was a very physically, very real challenge on me and my daughter being abandoned pretty much in a jungle. But that's definitely another podcast. But at that time when I did find myself...
And in an entire podcast, probably.
Probably. I could tell you everything from rice bags to empty bottles. But anyway, I was very alone. I mean, physically very alone, literally in the middle of a jungle. Yeah. I mean, literally, didn't know a single soul, probably in the whole country, let alone in the part of the jungle we were stuck in. And at that time, and I'll always be very grateful, social media did create the connections that I needed.
Yeah.
So I had unbelievable people, some who I know and some who I've never met in real life, who reached out to me at that time and offered help and offered all kinds of things. Can we send you food? Can we send you money? All these kinds of things, right? And do I know them in real life? No. Am I going to spend sort of Christmas dinner with them? No. But that doesn't mean that connection was any less valid than this one is this morning. I have really close colleagues / friends that I still have never met. I'm sure you have some too, since the pandemic, who have really continued to change my weeks and life. And therefore, I think it's very important for us, particularly in our generation, not to make sweeping statements to our children that online connections aren't real, because I think they are.
That absolutely feels like a mic drop moment.
Yes, done. Finish now. No, but seriously, empathy is the antidote. Being more connected, making sure that we have proper conversations, making sure that you listen to people. If you do one thing coming out of this conversation, it's to listen, to truly listen. Most of the time, we are listening to reply versus listening to understand.
Yeah.
Right. So, if you really said to me on a serious note, what is the one thing we can do to try and overcome loneliness? It would just be listen to each other and do it more often.
Mimi, I've enjoyed listening to you on this conversation. And if you've enjoyed listening to this conversation, please remember you can subscribe. We're in all the podcast channels, Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and also you can subscribe on YouTube. A reminder that this is part of a series of conversations about the Mentl Awards 2023. We have pulled together an inspiring collection of judges. Mimi is one of them. We'll be bringing more of those conversations, so please stay tuned. And if you want to be involved in the Mentl Awards 2023, if you want to amplify the great work that your organization is doing, please reach out to us. hello@mentl.space. Thank you.